This is the Dark Illumination Report Extra for Sunday, August 2nd, 2020. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about whether Diabolists should associate with non-believers.
This is a Dark Illumination Report Extra with RJ Womack.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for this episode of the podcast. It's RJ Womack, aka Brother Nero, and this is the Dark Illumination Report podcast. And this is the show where we promote the serious religious worship of Satan and demons as a serious faith and way of life. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about whether Diabolists should be associating with non-believers or not. This topic came up as I was discussing some things with one of the listeners of the show yesterday, and I thought it was important enough to bring up because I hadn't even thought about this, and it's one of those common questions. Now, for me personally, I try not to associate with non-believers whenever possible. I don't go out of my way to not associate with them. I guess I do sort of, but it's kind of, I know I have to associate with them and it's impractical to not associate with non-believers. So I guess that is the crux of my argument here. Was it good for the Yezetis? Was it good advice for the Yezetis, who the text of the Al-Jawah was originally intended for? Yes. And if you don't believe that, look at how they're being tortured and raped and murdered and stuff by the Muslims. They didn't follow the instructions they were given in the Al-Jawah, and now they're paying the price for that. They let people into their community. They allowed people to know about their religion, and their people have suffered ever since. So they should have listened to the advice they were given, but they didn't. And that's the consequence. As to whether modern Diabolists or Satanists should associate with people, like I said, it's really impractical to not associate with people that are non-believers, but I try to, whenever possible, not associate with them. And I don't think it's practical these days to avoid it, but I also think that if you associate with them too much, they can influence you and get between you and your connection with Satan. So my ultimate advice on this subject would be, if you're going to have non-believers in your life, make sure they're people that support your beliefs and don't get in your way of your relationship with the demonic gods. The other thing I would say also is that I wouldn't recommend getting into relationships with people who are non-believers. And I would never get involved in a relationship with somebody who was not a Diabolist. And the reason I wouldn't is because it always happens where the relationships get messed up if you have a non-believer involved in a relationship with a believer. And people will always say, well, my relationship's going well. My husband or my wife doesn't interfere with my religion. That may be true, but ultimately what happens, or eventually what happens, is that either the person kind of stops believing in the religion or doesn't have as strong of faith as they should have, and they stop devoting themselves to Satan the way they should, or the relationship suffers. Either happens one way or the other. And also I might mention that their children don't typically turn out to be believers either. They turn out to be atheists. They turn out to be non-believers, or at least agnostic. And that's not what we're trying to do, at least not in this tradition. As I said, the whole point of this particular tradition, the whole point of diabolism, the way that I'm teaching it, is to preserve a legacy of actual devil worship and actual satanic worship that is passed down from generation to generation. At least that's what we're attempting to do. And the only way you're going to do that is if you encourage people to marry within the faith. And if you want to look at how successful marrying within the faith is, the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews dominate the religious landscape precisely because they encourage their children to marry within the religion, precisely because they take articles of faith seriously, precisely because they don't listen to Peter Gilmore and atheistic Satanists about how to worship their gods. If they listen to atheists the way that most Diabolists listen to atheists and let atheistic philosophy affect their philosophy and the way they approach their gods, they wouldn't be as dominant as they are. But because they don't listen to idiots, and unfortunately most theistic Satanists do listen to idiots that don't actually believe in their religion, we are in the state we are in. So that's why I'm trying to get you guys to not even think of atheistic Satanism, or Satanism for that matter, as part of the Diabolist religion, because I think the modern occult philosophy has destroyed the future of religious Satanism or the religious worship of Satan, or diabolism if you prefer. And that's why I'm so adamant about these ideas that I promote on this podcast. I believe modern occultism is a cancer, it's a disease. Modern Satanism and the philosophy of modern Satanism, particularly atheistic Satanism, is designed to destroy religious devotion. It's designed to destroy religious Satanism, as the Church of Satan themselves have said. So when you take the philosophy of atheistic Satanism and you apply it to religious devil worship or diabolism, you're basically infecting your religion with a cancer. And one of the biggest things that modern atheistic Satanism promotes is the idea that, it doesn't matter whether you marry within the faith or not. And modern Satanists don't teach their children Satanism because that would be taking their free will away and that kind of thing. And so to just make a fine point on it and bring it back to the main point of all this, do I think there's anything wrong with associating with people who don't share our faith? Well, in this modern day, it's almost impossible not to. But I do think there's something wrong with being in a relationship with somebody who is not part of the faith, because in the end, it's either the relationship or the faith that is destroyed in the end. The faith or the relationship, one of them has to end. It usually doesn't work that way. And even the relationships that are successful, it's only temporary. They always end up falling apart. Either the person ends up abandoning the religion or they abandon the relationship in the end. I have yet to see one relationship where both sides of it succeed, where both sides of the equation succeed, and both the relationship and the religion are successful. That's just been my experience. Anyway, that's it for today, guys. Hope that helps. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Dark Illumination Report podcast. For the latest news headlines, show information, and more, go to rjwomack.com. That's rjwomack.com.